back to those who were with us in our standing committee earlier this morning. My name is Kayla Murray, and I'm the Standing Committee Chair for Finance, Economic Opportunities and Tourism. I'd like to welcome you to today, where we will deliberate on vote 12 for the Department of Economic Development and Tourism. With that, I would like to give the members who have joined us an opportunity to introduce themselves online. Over to the members.
Good afternoon, Chair. I'm Driekus van der Westhuizen, member of the committee.
Afternoon, Chair, once more. Isaac Mbulelo Sileku, member of the committee.
Good afternoon, Chair. Khalil Barankais.
Good afternoon, members. Thank you so much. I would now also like to hand over to the Minister and HOD, as well as respective officials, to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, Honourable Chairperson, and to the Honourable members. I'm joined today by the departmental top management of the Department of Economic Development and Tourism. If I may please extend an apology from HOD Dube, who is not able to be with us this afternoon. I don't know if perhaps the acting HOD, Mr. Rashid Tofi, would like to introduce the team briefly.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Chairperson. Yes, welcome. Thanks. Good to be here. Apologies on behalf of HOD once again. Let me have the team. I'm going to go down the list, just point out members of our team. And then you can just switch on your camera and introduce yourself. So let me do so. So Ashley So, just indicate your role and welcome.
Good afternoon, members. Ashley So. I'm the program manager for business regulation. Thank you very much.
And then Cheryl Julies.
Good afternoon, members. This is Cheryl Julies. I'm with Strategic and Operational Support.
Thank you. And I'll mention the members of representatives of our entities as well. So Doug Southgate.
Good afternoon. My name is Doug Southgate. I'm Chief Operating Officer for Freeport Saldanha. Thanks.
Thank you, Doug, and welcome. Fairuz Darcy. Hey, you're on mute for me.
Apologies. Good afternoon, Fairuz Darcy. I'm Director for Regional and Local Economic Development.
Next is Fernal.
Good afternoon, members. Good afternoon, Rashid. Fernal Abrams, Economic Development and Tourism in the Catalytic Infrastructure Unit. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my camera. Thank you.
No problem, Fernal. Thank you very much. Garth from Wescrow.
Hi, sorry. Garth van der Horst, Chief Trade and Investment Officer for Wescrow.
Thank you, Garth. And then Glenn Stein.
Afternoon, everyone. I'm Glenn. I'm Project Manager for Port of Cape Town Logistics. Thank you, Rashid.
Thank you, Glenn. Helen Davies.
Afternoon, all. Helen Davies, Chief Director for Green Economy.
Thank you. Thanks. Ilse van Skalkwyk.
Thank you, Rashid. Good afternoon, Ilse van Skalkwyk. I am the Program Manager for Sector Development, Program 3, as well as Program 6 is Tourism. Thank you.
Cool. And then Jacinta.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jacinta Twynham. I'm the Chief Assurance Officer at Wescrow.
Thanks, Jacinta. Jean.
Afternoon, everyone. Jean Skeltimer, Chief Marketing and Innovation Officer at Wescrow. Hi.
Thanks, Jean. Welcome. And then Joanne Johnson. Welcome, Joe.
Good afternoon, members. I'm Joanne Johnston, DTG at the department.
And of course, very much the person heading up the G4J strategy and implementation. So welcome, Joanne. Joe Mark Arnold.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Joe Mark Arnold, Head of Communications for DDAT.
Thank you, Joe Mark. Welcome to a large team. Apologies, we'll do this as quick as we can, but it's important to see who's all here. John Peters.
Good afternoon all. Good afternoon, members. John Peters, Program Manager for Program 5.
Thank you, John. Joshua Wolmerans.
Good afternoon, everybody. Joshua Wolmerans, responsible for enterprise development.
Okay. And then Martinez.
Yes, good afternoon all. Thank you, Rashid, and good afternoon, members and colleagues. Martinez van Wyk from Economic Sector Support. I'm responsible for the manufacturing industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Martinez. Michelle.
Good afternoon all. Michelle Ellis, Director Retail Production.
Thank you, Michelle. Monica.
Good afternoon, everybody. Monica Ewell, Chief Destination Marketing Officer at Westgro.
Cool. Thank you. And then our CFO, Memuna.
Good afternoon all. Memuna Abrams, Chief Financial Officer for the department.
Right. And then Nizam. I think Nizam said he may have stepped away, but he will be here. Nizam, if you're there still.
Yeah, I'm just introducing myself, Rashid. Thanks. It's Nizam Joseph and Chief Director, Skills Development and Innovation.
Thank you. Priyanka.
Afternoon, everyone. Priyanka Mugli, and I'm part of the finance unit.
Thanks, Priyanka. Rahima.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Rahima Logday, and I'm Director for Skills Incentives.
Thank you. We have Robert as well. Robert from the ministry. Can I introduce you to Robert? You member of our team? I mean, sorry, I thought this was the other Robert. This is Robert from our finance team. Apologies.
Good day, everyone. I'm Robert Lebreton from Finance Unit.
How's it, Robert? Sorry about that. And then someone you may not have met before, Sandiso. If you can introduce yourself. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sandiso, the CEO. Thank you.
Sandiso, you broke up for me a bit. Not sure if you're anybody else, but Sandiso is the CFO of Westgro. Yeah. Cool. And then Tim.
Good afternoon. It's Tim Powell. I'm Chief Director for the Digital Economy. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Renal Stander.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Renal Stander, CEO of Westgro.
Hey, thank you. Thanks, everybody. That's the team, Minister. I'll hand it back to you if I've not missed anybody. I see some people may have joined, but well, I'll hand it back to you, Minister, after I was going through the list. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. That's our team.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you very much to Mr. Tofi. So in terms of apologies received, yes, we've also received Mr. Dube's apology and noted that he would be represented by Mr. Tofi. We do hope that he feels much better soon. In terms of rules of engagement, and before we move on to the next chapter of our meeting, I would just like to ask that those on the call kindly keep themselves muted and also turn their video off throughout the duration of the call, just to make sure that it's smooth. Unless called on to speak, then please put your video on, and we'd love to see your smiles and your faces, and unmute yourselves as well. Also, in terms of any notifications or background sounds, it's useful if you have a pair of headphones just to cancel that out and turn off any notification sounds if not. With that said, I would now like to move on to the next part of our program for today. So the next part of our program is essentially for me to hand over to the Minister to make any introductory remarks and for her to hand over to relevant officials, perhaps Mr. Tofi, should he also wish to come in. Over to you, Minister.
Thanks very much, Chair. The Department of Economic Development and Tourism receives a budget of 512.8 million rand for the 2022-23 financial year. In this budget, just some highlights for the committee. We'll be focusing on energy resilience. We'll be focusing on growing our exports out of the Western Cape, which of course then requires supporting SMMEs to increase market access. At the same time, trying to diversify our exporter base. We'll be helping to remove barriers and support entrepreneurs. We'll be focusing on our investment strategy, and much of this will come through our entities, namely Westgrow, the ASEZ and Freeport Saldanha. We'll also be looking at employability and improving access to economic opportunities via skills and entrepreneurship, as well as SMME development. Of course, all that we do is underpinned by an ease of doing business philosophy, as well as advocacy work and enablement, as well as digital enablement. And so with that, some very brief introductory remarks. We look forward to engaging with the committee. Thank you. Mr. Tofi, I don't know if you would like to add anything or if we can go straight into questions.
Thank you, Minister. Perhaps I'll just add one comment that for the first time this year, we are on the precipice of quite an exciting strategy, of course, led by you, the G4J, and the priorities you just outlined shows our commitment as a department responding to that strategy. But I'm really excited that for the first time, I think in my 5 years at government, I see an entire cluster approach. I see every department owning this idea of jobs, and that's exciting. So what we present today is our 500 million contribution to the growth for jobs strategy. But I am excited that the whole of government under your leadership is taking jobs seriously, and with that, I think we can reach some of those audacious targets. So thank you, Minister. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you very much, Mr. Tofi. So with that, we will now move on to any questions that members may have relating to the introductory remarks, and then thereafter we'll move on to the entire budget. So are there any questions on introductory? I see Member Nkontlo's hand.
Can I show, Chair?
Yes, please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to the colleagues, and good afternoon once again to Minister after our session in the morning. I'm sure Minister would be expectant of my question, which when I asked it after the budget speech, she referred me to the discussion here today. And I've been trying to find my response even in the book. So maybe she may help me to understand about at what point or what exactly is her response around the issue of the informal economy that one has been raising, and every time, the goalpost is moved. And secondly, to the comments made by DDG Tofi. Notwithstanding the new strategy he's mentioning, I would want him to then juxtapose this new strategy on jobs with the target of plus 500,000 jobs from this department, I'm assuming, if I've heard him correctly. And I would want to understand what is different from the strategy, from the previous strategy, which was led in the last administration by the previous premier, which was also, I think they were called VIPs, if I'm not mistaken. And I think, again, DDET, even they had a target of almost the same number, about 400 and something thousand jobs. So as he says, he's seeing this for the first time and all of that. What then could have been the difference between what they would have implemented in the previous administration versus this one? And how would this one, in terms of their own performance, if one were to follow those numbers of jobs that they were mandated in the previous job strategy of the provincial government? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Member. Members, are there any further questions in relation to the introductory remarks? I see no hands. My question is then, I noted in the Minister's introductory remarks that the G4J would have an increased focus on investment, and particularly foreign investment. If the Minister could please unpack this a little bit more. It's a very interesting point. How will this be achieved, and what are the targets in comparison to previous years, or as well harboring on Member Nkontlo's question in comparison to prior targets? I'll now hand over to the Minister and to respective officials. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair, to you and Honourable Nkondlo for those questions. So the question on the informal economy, thanks very much for that. I think we'll respond in two ways. The first is on kind of current interventions for the informal economy, and then the second is more on, what the growth for jobs strategy contemplates for the informal economy into the future. Chair, just to note that the growth for jobs strategy is almost complete, so we are kind of in the final stretches of it, which we hope to have done by the end of the financial year, and then thereafter we'll be taking it to Cabinet and so on. And we'll be very happy to present it once it is concluded. So we'll be able to then respond and be able to share with you all the targets that we have in each of those 7 priority areas, how we got to those specific targets, what were the problem statements underpinning each of those, and we'll be able to present those to this committee in full detail as soon as it is finalized, which is very, very shortly. Then if I could then ask Ms. Johnson to talk about the informal economy in terms of G4J, and perhaps Fairuz Darcy on current interventions, or Mr. Tofi, would you like to delegate it differently?
No, that's fine. I'll say a few remarks, but then I think Faye and Joshua will answer more specifically. That'll be fantastic. Thank you.
And then Joe on the G4J into the future.
Yes.
Perfect.
I'll kick off, Joe, before I hand over to you. Thank you. Thanks, Minister, and thank you, Member Nkondlo, for the question. Joe, I'm going to hand over to you to speak more explicitly, but I think what's amazing by this new approach is that I've seen it. The informal and township economies is an integral part of this new strategy, the rural and urban dimensions of our approach, and how do we make sure that we look at the actual building blocks of the economy and what needs to be done. So, Joanne, I'm going to hand over to you to really indicate our approach to the economy, but maybe we could also start with the difference in our strategic approach compared to previous years. Over to you, Joe, and then we can go to Faye and Josh for more of the detail.
Thanks, Rashid. Okay, so maybe just to address, thank you for the question. We're really looking forward to presenting the strategy through to the standing committee. But just the key difference, and there are a couple, so the key differences between the G4J, as we're now calling it, and the previous strategies, there's sort of quite a few factors. So the first thing is that it is an all-of-government approach. So previously, strategies have basically reflected the summation of different departments' contributions. In the development of this strategy, it has been essentially the entire economic cluster that has been really actively involved in identifying the various the various key priority areas and the interventions that reside within them. So it has been in the development and all of government strategy, and also in terms of the implementation, it will be quite transversal in its implementation in most cases. The second is that we are focusing on systemic change. And so frequently government sometimes has a tendency of looking at the next crisis, trying to deal with it, and then essentially constantly moving on sort of short-term anyway benefits. But actually we need to address the systemic change that is required so that we can really deal with challenges and the problems at core as opposed to just the symptoms. The third is the focus on horizontal enablement. And so this is not about just simply helping a specific company in or just about a specific sector or industry, but it's really seeing how we can bring about change that positively impacts on the entire private sector, corporates right down to the informal. And then the third, the next point is stretch targets. And so we definitely have substantial stretch targets, which may not necessarily make everybody comfortable, but I think we need to be ambitious given the challenges that our economy faces. And so, for example, and for the chairperson, just as an illustration with regards to investment, historically, our investment targets have been, for example, 5 billion over 5 years. In the G4J, our stretch target by 2035 is effectively 20% of GDP, which essentially translates to 200 billion per annum. And this target we've drawn very strongly from the National Development Plan, which basically states that in order for us to achieve 4 to 6% GDP growth nationally, that our gross fixed capital formation has to be 30%. And this is effectively what we're trying to do, is actually live and realize and actualize the national development goals taken forward to 2035. So it's just that is effectively the difference between the current strategy, which is also long-term, whereas previous strategies tend to have 5-year time horizon. This strategy essentially has 12 years, which then allows us the space to actually do that systemic change, which sometimes takes a little bit more time and gestation in order to actualize. So that's the difference with the strategy. And then with regards to informal as well as township, it does very much land in the G4J. And I think Ferus and Joshua would probably talk a little bit to it. But what we have done is taken the approach that the informal is not binary. So you get different levels of informality. And it's about saying, how can we help the informal be better embedded and empowered within the value chains that they operate? Because generally, if you look at various sectors, and so, for example, in the waste economy, for example, the waste collectors are a pivotal part of that value chain, but generally they have very little power to negotiate favorable terms that allows them to have a sustainable livelihood. And so it's really how one actually grows that value chain and then to also better support those the informal players within that value chain, and similarly across all of the sectors that we will be focusing on that provide growth opportunities. But I think the other point that I just also wanted to perhaps make is that we recognize that informal and township are not synonymous, but there is quite a lot of overlap. And in going forward, the idea is that we will also pull the informal sector more strongly into the township strategy that the department will be developing. Thank you very much. Can I hand over to Shed?
Sure. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for that answer. Faye, I'll hand over to you to just explain how we've started to integrate our township growth strategy with G4J, and then maybe Josh can add to that in terms of some of the programs we have outlined here.
Thanks, Rashid. So I think initially off the back, just to dovetail with what Joe had just advised, is that the department does have a draft township economic growth strategy, and we are currently looking at aligning that with G4J. It will then go through its phases, go through routing to minister, and essentially make sure that it aligns to G4J in the larger scheme of things. More specifically, I can report the work of the department in the informal township trading space business has essentially covered 11 infrastructure projects supported across about 8 municipalities in the province. We've looked at about 6.7 million leveraged off the municipalities to support those projects along with our own funds, which obviously flows from the SMME Booster Fund. As you know, it's been operating since 2019. So preliminary figures, we have about 49 jobs plus additional 61 jobs created to date. This is a year where we're also consolidating some of the trading infrastructure and looking at the next level of support. Also then to say that from a red tape reduction perspective, our municipalities are not in a position to establish individual red tape units at local level. It is too costly, and it considers quite a change to the organogram, which is and as we know, at municipal level, resources are substantially constrained. So our red tape reduction unit specifically looks at case by case municipal requests that come in, particularly in the space of trading permits, if there are any blockages, and perhaps proactive systemic issues that we can tackle with the municipality. In the program for 23-24, Red Tape has got at least 2, 3, 4 joint G4J collaborations planned that will particularly help support municipalities in the township specific cases. Our case management system is also obviously open, and so specific cases are lodged with the Red Tape unit to address those at local level. We are also looking to support a service charter initiative at municipal level, particularly not just for SMMEs, but also perhaps in the township economy space. In addition to that, on the trading facilities, a lot of the foundational stuff has been put in place with either brick and mortar trading facilities built or containerized facilities being established. But we also then look at supporting through lobbying partners. So CEDA is a substantial partner with our trading facilities, offering training. And we have Department of Agriculture, Department of Land Reform, and CIFA also playing a substantial role to just take those trading facilities to a more sustainable level. Those are the current initiatives underway. Thanks, Rashid.
Thank you. I think we covered them. So thank you, Chairperson. Back to you.
Thank you very much. Members, are there any further follow-up questions in relation to the introductory comments? Member Nkontlo and then Member van der Westhuizen.
No, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the response. The Chair, my concern about this topic is that if one were to look at what the ease of doing business or the red tape reduction philosophy, which tries to get things done more than keeping things in the system so that the growth that we're talking about gets to be realized, I would really want to call on the Department of Economic Development to start actually practicing what they preach in as far as township economy, informal economy is concerned. And I'm raising this because this conversation, as a person who has been in this legislature, is actually equals almost 7 years that I've been here. The same department that now, as we sit and we theorize the issue of the informal and the township, which all of us understand that we may use the term interchangeably, but they are not the same. Actually, it is the same department under the previous HOD that actually went and did a study then of a township economy. And that study, till to date, one is still seeing individualized projects. There was a township revitalization strategy. When one was asking about that strategy, it was being reviewed, so every time there's always a perpetual review. This thing is being cooked in the oven, and the timing of actually getting the strategy seems to always be like a moving target. And I'm venting on this one, Chair, because I think it becomes unfair that every time we talk about the informal investors or the township economy, there's always a review that takes these things back and forth into the red tape of government instead of the actual solutions. And my question then would be, whilst we are busy with all of these, what then becomes in the interim, because this is what I'm sure many studies, academic and others, have actually termed, the issue of the center versus the periphery, because these are markets or these are economies that are actually outside of what we term the mainstream. And therefore, that is why they will always find ways of fending for themselves and at times, be in conflict with the law, as we have seen in the city of Cape Town, the issue of law enforcement with informal traders, when sometimes the issue of permitting is not necessarily smooth, nor is made easily, you know. So I'm just worried about these isolated projects here in this corner there, because if something is not honed in any strategy, it's also very even difficult to measure its impact. And that is why I think one of the questions that I've raised to you, Chair, which you've started to respond to, is actually the environment in which township and informal economy is operating in. Because in the absence of, indeed, you know, clear government response, that is exactly the same way that government is able to take up, you know, strategies, take up time, as Joan talks about, you know, the R1 billion investment, which mainly are pitched at high-level corporates, and government will be doing everything, you know, and anything to ensure that big corporates are enabled in the economy. And now you have a situation of extortion, you have a situation of protection fees, where over and above the red tape in municipalities, now entrepreneurs in townships are having to deal with the issue of paying protection fees. And I want to know from the minister, is that in this strategy, which is in the future, you know, that you are referring to, are there elements of this particular strategy that talks about the safety environment in these markets, both the informal spaces and the township spaces, and what is being done in that regard?
Thank you very much, Member. I recognize Member van der Westhuizen.
Yes, thank you, Chair. If you say we can discuss the introductory remarks, I almost want to say quite often it's what was not said that interests me. And while I appreciate the focus on the private sector as the major player when it comes to job creation and economic growth, very little was said about the role of central government and those functions that in terms of our constitution do not fall under that of province. And having said that, and having listened to the Honourable Nkondlo, speaking of protection money and so on, I think we all agree why it is then so important for the Western Cape to assist the South African Police Services. And I do believe that, you know, in an orderly and society and where crime can be brought under control, obviously all of that plays a big role to pave the way towards future economic growth. But there are a number of aspects in the Western Cape, and if I put on my hat as the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Agriculture, you know, it's about water for irrigation. You have all heard about the canal and the increase in the capacity of the Holsloot Canal feeding the Brandvlei Dam. But it's not only the construction work, which in many cases has been delayed, and Clan William Dam is a very well-known example of that. But once we've got the water, we will also have to know to whom will that water be made available. And therefore, there are things such as calls for water licenses, the allocation of water rights and things like that. We have here the official with a task to monitor the performance of the Cape Town port, which again is crucial to us, and particularly from an agricultural point of view. And again, it seems to me as if the role of central government, you know, is very important in that regard. Yet, you know, we did not hear anything from the minister or from Mr. Tufi in that regard. So my question is, can you assure us that, you know, we're not only looking at the private sector, both formal and informal, but that we are also emphasizing at national level, and that we are emphasizing with success, the importance of infrastructure investment, because we've heard the term quite often, infrastructure-led growth. But I'm afraid, you know, things like the railway line and so on, the development of the Saldanha, we've got representatives here of the Freeport in Saldanha. it can play such a huge role to unlock future growth opportunities in the Western Cape if we could get the gas line from Saldanha down to first Atlantis and then later on to the industrial areas of Milton and so on. So who's taking the responsibility for those discussions? Where and when is that being put on the agenda? And can we also be informed of the initiatives or the successes in that regard? As I've said, it was not really mentioned in the introductory remarks, and I do believe that it's a crucial keystone in unlocking the Western Cape's potential and creating further growth of jobs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do recognize that there is a hand from Fairuz Darcy. Fairuz, if you could advise if you're coming in as an official or as a member of the public who also has the right to ask questions during this particular session.
Thank you, Chair. I'm with the department, and I just wanted to respond to Member Nkondlo's last comments. And so I think that we are completely supportive of the sentiment that the member has raised. But I think just to contextualize the initiatives that the department is undertaking, has undertaken, and intends to undertake, it is grounded in the fact that the best support possible for township economies is as close to local level as possible. And that means that municipalities, who are the coalface of delivery, they set the bylaws, they set the processes, and they set the business environment for those informal trading spaces or township economy activities. One of the areas that the department is always been working in is in that space to support the municipality to provide the best possible environment for these businesses, be they formal or informal. By way of example, the Business Development Support Program that we do with Drakenstein Municipality looks at the supporting entrepreneurs, both formal and informal, with both financial and non-financial support. And so the best way in which we can be responsive at local level at this time is to work with the municipalities. There are only a handful of municipalities in the province that has clear projects, policies, and programs for the township economy. And so our interventions are not as ad hoc as perhaps it is portrayed. It is working with the municipalities. And then I think Joanne has set the scene for what the Growth for Jobs intends to do. If the township economic growth strategy is to be effectively adopted at municipal level and then customized for their own township areas and for the informal trading environment, then we do need to spend a bit of time just aligning the township economic growth strategy that the province has developed with Chief Ujay. And so we would welcome any suggestions the member or the standing committee as a whole has in that respect. And we're quite happy to build that into the programs when we look at both very specific interventions or municipal support interventions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm going to recognize Member Seleko, whose hand has been going up and down. And then I also, Member, before I allow you to ask your question, I just want to check, Member Nkondlo, is that a legacy hand? Okay, that's a legacy hand. Member Seleko, if you could please ask your question.
Yeah, Chair, I thought you were going to allow me before the previous speaker spoke, but nonetheless, I'm here. So Chair, yeah, thank you very much. Let me also greet the Minister. Good afternoon, and to the acting HOD. The Chair, what one would want to know in terms of the G4J is how is the department going forward going to make sure that there is alignment in terms of what we want to achieve as a province in terms of creating jobs? Because what one has always seen is that our municipalities are not always aligned in what we want to achieve as a province. Why do I say that? Is because all our municipalities, as we have heard this morning, that financially are not, in terms of capacity, they are lacking. In terms of strategy, they are lacking. As a result, that they are not moving together. So one would want to know in terms of what is it that I have learned from the previous strategies and plans that the department has done research on and tried to make sure that they contribute to the growth of this province, has been alluded by Member Nkondlo. You know, because seemingly what we want always see is that plans, money is invested in coming with new ideas, and then those ideas are abandoned because the municipalities are not contributing to what we want to achieve. What are the lessons that I have learned in the past, and what is it that they are going to do different in terms of G4J so that G4J becomes a success and that everybody within our province get to be seen as a contributor and as a beneficiary, and that no municipality or no resident or no sector within our province is left behind. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Member Seleko. Member Seleko, I will now, from your question, hand back to Minister Wenger and to the department to respond to the questions asked.
Thanks very much, Chair, and to the members for those questions. I think Faye did respond in part to Honourable Nkondlo's question, but I just wanted to make the point between red tape and ease of doing business. So red tape is very important, and that helps with specific or individual cases, which we help to unblock so that people can and businesses can carry on with their issues. So, for example, in the informal space, we might get complaints about a particular business that has an issue with a bylaw that is too restrictive. But what we want to do is take it a step further and say it's not only about the red tape for those individual cases. It's about understanding that if we get a number of individual complaints about an overly restrictive bylaw, that we can understand that it actually is an ease of doing business challenge. So how do we then analyze the environment to understand where we could unblock them generally? So, for example, a program on suggestions on how to amend bylaws for municipalities to make it easier for informal traders, for example, would then become an ease of doing business project that essentially came out of a red tape reduction complaint. That then kind of moves into, in part, into Honourable Sileko's question, which is about alignment across government, and also in part to what Honourable van der Westhuizen was saying, is that sometimes, or in many instances, the province doesn't have necessarily those levers to be able to directly change what that blockage might be. That being so, we do have many ways in which we could make improvements, and that can be through advocacy or partnership, and something that this department does very well. So, for example, partnering with national government departments, like we've done recently with our MOU with the Department of Small Business Development, or, for example, in the municipal space, where in this year you'll see in our budget a permitting reform program, which is basically to try and unlock building plans and building plans converting into construction sites. Because we know that at the moment there's quite a lot of growth in the Western Cape in terms of construction, and we also know that there are a lot of issues with certain or some municipalities that take quite long to be able to process those things. So what we're trying to do is to try and encourage or to help other spheres of government where we can to try and improve some of those ease of doing business issues. On the water issue, Honourable van der Westhuizen raised that matter. Water is, in fact, one of the key pillars of the Growth for Jobs strategy, but we're not presenting the Growth for Jobs strategy today, which is why I didn't raise it in my introductory remarks, because that would primarily fall in a different department's budgets. But that kind of shows how the different departments work together with those kind of cross-cutting matters that the economy needs. So we know we need stable water supply, because we know when we get to things like day zero, they impact the economy severely. And so we have contemplated things such as a stable water supply, but it doesn't fit necessarily in the DDAP budget, which is under discussion today. However, when we do come and present you, we'll be able to unpack all of this in detail and to give the committee a better idea of the levers and accelerators that we are putting forward to be able to deploy to these certain problems. In terms of gas, that is part of the provincial government's energy response, and the infrastructure department will be taking on the exploratory research in respect of gas. I'm not sure then, Acting HOD, if there's anything I've missed or anything you'd like to build on from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I'll build briefly on the township approach, and then just to line you up, Joe, if you could address the issue of how we've partnered with national. I think that's quite a key part of our new approach as a G4J, is how we're unlocking national government players. We know we cannot achieve infrastructure success without partnering with national. So, Joe, if you could address that just when I'm done, including Minister Seleko's issue of alignment as well in the department around infrastructure. But Minister Nkondlo, Member Nkondlo, just lastly, without belaboring the point, I remember and I recall your frustration about a coordinated approach to the township. And I can assure you our strategy, one of the reasons why we kept delaying it, we first had COVID for a couple of years. And then when we embarked on the G4J, we wanted to make sure it was entirely not a standalone township strategy, but integrated into our approach. And we'll be very shortly, we have a very clear idea of an integrated approach to the informal economy, but it's important. It covers things like Minister said around red tape and informal economy, but it has not meant we haven't continued to address issues that we know are really the burning platform issues for people in informal economies, like broadband issues. So we have projects in the province that are addressing issues of digital access and broadband, issues of crime and safety and housing. And even now, with our emphasis on energy, we have a very large part of our budget focusing on those families at risk who we can approach. So our approach to the township economy is integrated. It's also dispersed throughout various of the players across the province. And then, Joanna, if I can hand over to you for those two questions on partnerships with national government and our strategic infrastructure approach. Thank you.
Sure. I think the Minister sort of covered the issue around the national partnerships. But if I can just say, certainly for the Growth for Jobs strategy, the target for infrastructure, so we have a priority focus area on infrastructure and connected economy. And the target there is for, again, drawing very heavily from the National Development Plan, is for our infrastructure or public capex budget expenditure to be a third of the gross fixed capital formation target, which is what sits in the National Development Plan. So that basically translates to 100 billion rand per annum to be spent by public sector on infrastructure in the province. And public sector includes the province, but it also includes the municipality and national. So by definition, that target basically means that we do have to work in tandem and in partnership with our national counterparts, and that would land in the port in terms of the logistics and a number of other key economic infrastructure projects that are going to be required that enables us to reach our overall target. So it definitely is premised on partnership and working with national government. And as the Minister said, there are a lot of policy, there are a number of policy levers that we've identified that enables us to do that. And similarly with the municipalities, there are a number of interventions that specifically look at how we learn from our past, perhaps suboptimal attempts to work with the municipalities, recognize areas of perhaps weakness within the municipalities, and there are specific interventions that we've identified in the strategy that seeks to overcome those previous challenges. But it really is looking at partnership not only with private sector, but essentially with our different spheres of government and also within the Western Cape government. I also just wanted to say that with respect to the specific question around the informal economy and the challenges in the townships that they have around extortion, there are there is a very specific intervention that has been identified in the G4J strategy. And if I'm permitted to read it, it basically says, one, it is in identifying and addressing challenges and ease of doing business, including the concerns about crime and safety within the environment for entrepreneurs and micro businesses. And together with the municipalities and relevant business association and chambers, consider establishing then business support centers in this community. So there's explicit sort of recognition of the challenges specifically in the townships, and the intention is to deal with that within the strategy, but then also in terms of the implementation plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joanne, and thanks, team, for your answers. Back to you, Chairperson. Not sure about anybody else, but I'm not either seeing or hearing the chairperson.
Same
Chair,
here.
I think those are all the questions responded to, Chair.
Oh, the chair is back. We don't hear you.
No, we can't hear you, unfortunately. Nope.
You're still on mute. I'm sure we can give the chair just a moment to sort out the microphone on their side. Chair, it shows us mute on our screens.
Members, I've disabled my Bluetooth. Hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Members, are you able to hear me now?
We can hear you.
Indeed.
Perfect. All right. Okay. Technology gremlins. Members, so we'll now move on to the next portion, which is the consideration of the budget. I'm going to put the budget to you in its entirety rather than going through the budget on a page-by-page basis. So if you could please raise your hands to indicate whether you have a question, noting that we are looking at the entire budget. Thank you. I recognize Member van der Westhuizen, and then I recognize Member Nkonklo.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, if I may say, I found it very interesting going through the budget in the sense that there were quite a number of changes from previous year's budgets, which I think is a sign of a budget being taken under the loop very closely, and programs, etc., being evaluated, and that there's been a real effort to change direction or to give some more impetus to certain of these initiatives. Now, this has resulted in a number of significant percentage changes for a number of items under this vote. And I would appreciate it if we could get some explanation as to the strategy or the thinking behind that. First, if I could start then on the income side on page 626, I see, for example, that there's a significant growth in the line which is Treasury funding financing from the current year's 23 million to a proposed or budgeted 30 million in this budget. But then again, in the next year, it will drop quite sharply again. So perhaps if we could just get an indication why the expected increase and then the decrease. Unfortunately, under summary of receipts, it just confirms, what the figures are saying, but it doesn't give us the reason for that. Then on page 629, under the Saldanha Bay IDZ, I don't know if the figures that we see there for the past 3 years refer to the huge investment in infrastructure, but we do see a significant drop in the budget allocated to the Saldanha Bay IDZ from almost 42 million to only 12.7 million for the upcoming year. Perhaps if we could just get the rationale behind that as well. And then I presume you would like us, rather to go for more than one round of questions. The same on page 634, table 9.2. I find it interesting. I see the numbering is 1, 2, and then 4. There may have been a line previously that is no longer covered, but that the red tape allocation has also dropped quite significantly from the 20.5 million to only 13 million in this year that we are aiming at. So perhaps if we could just first stick with those 3 questions from my side. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, members. If I can ask for this round that we stick to 2 questions, and we will indeed have follow-ups. Member Seleko, I do see your hand, but I note that Member Nkondlo did try to raise her hand before you. Member Nkondlo, would you like to come in?
Yes, Chair. On page 611, under ease of doing business, if one consider what is there right up to the last paragraph, I just want to understand on this work, Chair, when the department refers to streamlining of selected bylaws, can they be specific? Which are those bylaws to date that they would have streamlined with the municipalities, if any, or part of this 23, 24 sort of plans with those, and what kind of interface, like as we were talking with Minister early in the morning, that he's got some in forum with those that are in finance. What type of forums between herself or officials wherein she's able to interface on this particular work? My second one, Chair, is on page under enterprise development in 615. I just want to check, Chair, that the SMME Booster Fund, which I see is continuing, and that should be appreciated. But my understanding of the previous approach of the SMME Booster Fund, and perhaps colleagues can speak to and give more detail, is that the bigger portion would go to intermediaries versus the portion that goes directly. I think one sees there, I think on the second paragraph there, it speaks about 7 organizations will support 243. So my interest here, I just want to understand, is whether in the continuation of the booster fund, are we still taking the intermediary approach? And if so, what percentage of the booster fund of this financial year, would go to those intermediaries versus the actual SMMEs, and what has been, the success stories from this particular approach? Thanks.
Thank you very much. I recognize Member Seleko.
Thank you very much, Chair. I beg for indulgence. I'm a new member on this committee, so some of the questions that I might ask might be old questions that you have answered previously. But I will just go to page 611 and ease of doing business. The department mentioned that currently they are implementing 16 projects across 11 municipalities. One would want to know, out of the 11 municipalities, how many are from the rural areas as I come from a rural municipality myself. And also in terms of page 616, the department talks about energy resilience. What is the relationship between the Department of Local Government and this particular department when it comes to the implementation of this particular of Municipal Energy Reliance Program? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. I will also put a question forward. So on page 634, it looks at sub-program 2.1 and focuses particularly on enterprise development. An allocation of 18.5 million is made for the MTEF, specifically for the purpose of energy and green economy projects. This is fantastic as a result of, the threat of blackouts that we face, and also in that we struggle to keep the lights on from day to day. So my question is, what kind of projects will be practically funded, and how will the beneficiaries then be selected to play a part in ultimately putting a stop to load shedding? With that, I will hand over to the Minister and to the department.
Thank you very much, Chair. Sorry, just writing notes furiously. All right, I'm going to try and answer some of the questions, and then I will defer to the department for some of the others. Honourable van der Westhuizen's question on financing. I'll ask the CFO if she's able to share the good news with the committee. Then the question on Saldanha Bay IDZ, similar to our discussion in the earlier session, we are trying to get Saldanha onto a path of sustainability, and Saldanha able to fund much of its own operations, and that's why you will then see a reduction in the provincial government's contribution towards that specific entity as it kind of stabilizes and moves on that pathway. Then the question on the reduction in red tape reduction, I'm going to ask Mr. Tofi to take that. And then there's a few questions on ease of doing business and red tape. We have Honourable Nkondlo's question on streamlining bylaws. I'm not sure if maybe Faye or Michelle can take that one. On the forums, we recently held the Ease of Doing Business awareness event, which was a fantastic event. I think it was last week, actually, where we called together a whole lot of departments, environmental affairs and development planning, education. I can't remember, there were quite a lot of departments represented, where we actually went into detail where different departments could share some of the issues and also share best practice ideas, and use that forum to be able to promote precisely this ease of doing business and awareness across the government. Then there were some questions on the SMME Booster Fund. Tofi, if you could take that. Again, ease of doing business from Honourable Sileko on which were the 11 municipalities. Perhaps, Michelle, you could take that one. Then there was a question on the collaboration between local government and DDAT on energy. Helen, if you'll take that. And then enterprise development and the 18 million rand for sustainability of SMMEs. Perhaps John could take that one. Rashid, can I hand over to you?
Yes, thank you, Minister. That's fantastic. And CFO, are you ready to tackle the first issues of the budget adjustments? And perhaps you can, while you're there, CFO, if you don't mind, would you address the change in the red tape spend as well, to explain that one? And then all the other Minister, you've neatly redirected them. I'll repeat it when you're done, Michelle. Mimona, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, members. Thank you for the questions. I think maybe to start off with page 626, in terms, I think the overall question was the positive news about the increase in equitable share, or increase in the budget. So I think member van der Westhuizen is very correct. There's been quite a different approach to the budget. And what you are seeing being demonstrated there specifically is the energy allocation that came through from Provincial Treasury for the department. So the increase specifically in terms of the bottom line relates to the energy money, the additional energy money that once we speak through the programs, we'll have an idea of exactly what budget was given for which area in terms of energy. With regard to the financing area, the 3423, so the question was in terms of the increase. So the 30 million specifically relates to a allocation, once-off allocation for EDP. At this point, the EDP is going through a strategic relook. So for the 23-24 financial year, the department received the once-off allocation. And once we have a position on the EDP would either remain with the department, and we'll see that increase going through to the 24, 25, and 25, 26 year. With regard to page 634, I think Minister answered the question on Saldanha IDZ, which relates to the self-sustainability. So with regard to the red tape area, the reduction from 20 million to 13.3 million. And I think it's related to the question also in terms of the support to municipalities. So the red tape unit has been on a program for, I would say, the last 4 years, where they implement certain systems in terms of ease of doing business, automation systems in terms of the municipalities being able to move from a paper system to a far more digital system. So the approach for 23-24 is to try and consolidate and to actually look at what has been the impact. So instead of us rolling out more of these systems, what's been the impact over the last 5 years? We've rolled out a significant amount of systems. Let's look at what has been the impact and how do we improve, or how do we actually then roll out further. So the significant reduction in the 20 to the 13 relates to the municipal fund that we've actually reduced in the 23-24 year, and to actually focus on a far more consolidated approach to the red tape area. Rashid, I think that's my 2 questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Memona. And so, Michelle, if you could please address the issue of some of the municipal bylaws, and then Josh, perhaps you can go into the detail and the success story, member in Kondlo, of us using intermediaries. We have very specific details of how that has really worked, how it's been a fantastic, good governance delivery mechanism. And Josh, you or Faye can continue to explain how this has impacted on the 11 municipalities for member Seleko. Yeah. And Helen, you can continue straight afterwards then on the DLG work that we're doing. Cool. So over to you, Michelle, first.
Thank you, Rashid. To respond to the issue of the bylaws, in the past, our approach was we looked at it more ad hocly, like around when a business complains or etc. But last financial year, we started focusing specifically on what is the need in municipalities. Thus far, we've developed a model events policy and bylaw, a model events film, a model film policy and bylaw, and this will be rolled out to municipalities. They've already reached out to us for assistance, because some municipalities either don't have any bylaws, or they treat film and events as the same thing, or their film and events bylaws are just adding to the red tape. We've also, through the ease of doing business team, including Tim that's on the line, worked with National to develop a standard draft bylaw for way leaves for municipalities to customize for their areas. And then as part of the fund, but the bylaws I just mentioned, those are model bylaws that can be customized in municipalities. However, as part of the Municipal Ease of Doing Business Fund, Stellenbosch has also reached out to us to assist with drafting what is called an economic overlay zone to be incorporated in their planning bylaw, which will exempt certain areas from applying for land use for events and outdoor dining in the identified areas. So that is the recent work we've been doing in the municipal bylaw environment for the past year. And then I think the second question related to the municipalities that we've been supporting. Our interventions are directed at the non-metro municipalities. So the municipalities we've been working with is like Drakenstein, Langeberg municipality, Stellenbosch, Berg River, Matsikama, Overstrand. Prince Albert, Mossel Bay, Knysna, Bitto, Swellendam. I mentioned Matsikama already. Thank you, Rashid. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. And then Kay or Josh, which of you are going to take the detailed question on the SMME Booster Fund and the use of the intermediaries?
So Rashid, I will take the question. So I think the SME Booster Fund, I think the advantage of the SME Booster Fund is about our ability to partner with organizations that are already providing support to small, medium, and micro enterprises in the Western Cape. I think the important fact to note is that we are partnering with organizations and not with individual SMMEs, but obviously through that partnership arrangement with different organizations, they are supporting SMMEs. I think the important thing to note is the issue of our ability to leverage resources or funding through the partnership arrangement. And maybe just on a practical level, for example, one of the projects that we are supporting, so the Booster Fund is about focusing on both expanding and enhancing support to SMMEs. So, for example, Warm Up is one of the projects where we're supporting women-owned businesses in this current financial year. So generally, Warm Up is an organization. They're based up in Joburg, but also they have an office now in the Western Cape. So they generally support 3 to 5 women in the Western Cape, women-owned businesses. Our contribution in terms of the partnership with Warm Up, for example, enables an additional 25 to 30 women to be able to be part of that particular program that Warm Up is rolling out in the Western Cape. So in that sense, it's about expanding the ability of businesses to come onto these particular programs. So in that sense, that's the advantage, I think, of the Booster Fund model, but also looking at enhancements. So instead of, for example, providing support, say 2 particular types of support, whether it's mentorship or coaching, our support will also then enable these businesses to access maybe funding or grant funding. They'll be able to access equipment or other types of business development support. So I think that's the benefit, I think, in terms of the Booster Fund, in how we leverage resources to assist and support small, medium, and micro enterprises in terms of the type of support that we do offer these particular business. Also, just in terms of the link to the question that was posed, so the majority of the funding allocated to these organizations goes to the SMMEs and not to those particular organizations. And I think we've got particular criteria in our evaluation that focuses on where we assess to what extent the support is going to SMMEs or the organization. So I can definitely say that the majority of the funding goes to the SMMEs because our focus is on supporting SMMEs and not on the operations of an organization. Thanks, Rashid.
Thank you, Joshua. Joshua, while you've got the floor, do you want to address the question by the chairperson about how we're selecting the beneficiaries for our load shedding relief program that we're partnering with National?
Thank you, Rashid. So just in terms of the Alternative Energy Support Program, we are at the moment in discussions with the Department of Small Business Development, especially through the Small Enterprise Finance Agency. So to look at, because there's discussions at DSBD to support businesses, especially given the impact of load shedding, in terms of looking at alternative energy sources. So we have been in discussions with CIFA in that particular regard to either see how do we either complement or how do we partner in terms of supporting businesses that are affected by load shedding in the Western Cape. Part of the discussions that we've had with CIFA, for example, is to so CIFA is, for example, looking at specifically supporting your formal businesses, your small and your medium businesses through solar PV, where CEDA, for example, is looking at supporting your micro and your township businesses. So we are planning to schedule meetings with CEDA just to also see what they're looking at in terms of the rollout. So there's still a bit of uncertainty in terms of what the program is going to look at from National in terms of their particular rollout. But so we're trying to complement what we're trying to do in the Western Cape versus what National is doing, either complementing or partnering. So I think obviously, Rashid, one of the big issues that we are looking at is those sectors in terms of the businesses that support. Especially looking at where are those businesses, especially those with high energy consumption, and how do we then look at supporting businesses across the SMME spectrum. Part of obviously some of the criteria that we will look at. So we will look obviously at businesses, for example, with your audited financial statement, if we're talking about formal businesses, We're looking at how the business has been impacted by load shedding. We'll obviously look at criteria such as your tax clearance certificates and those kind of things. So the department is in the process, and we're engaging and working closely with the energy unit to put together that criteria that will enable businesses to apply to a broader call for applications to get support via the alternative energy support program. Thanks, Rashid.
Thank you so much, Joshua. And lastly, Helen, if you could address the issue of how we work with DLG, local government.
Yeah, thanks very much. So we work very closely with the Department of Local Government as well as a number of other departments. Excuse me, through the Municipal Energy Resilience, the MER program, DLG is firmly represented on the steercom for that. Both departments have been supporting electricity master plan updates, as an example, in municipalities. So we collaborate to make sure that we're supporting different municipalities and we're supporting those that are the highest priority to support. We also then share the same terms of reference. So we update that terms of reference together and use that same terms of reference, whether the work has been funded by DLG or DDAT. We, as DDAT, have been driving what's called an MER forum, which includes 10 municipalities and the city of Cape Town. That's to build capability and awareness around energy resilience, and DLG is part of that forum. And then DLG leads on the district coordinating forums, the MINMAs and other such forums, and we engage with municipalities through those forums. As you may know, provincial government is in the process of reconfiguring the Western Cape energy resilience approach. So that's going to include including redefining the roles of various departments in order to scale up and speed up energy delivery. As part of that, the energy budget has been developed through an integrated approach. So all departments will be working on projects in a transversal manner. So the Department of the Premier is coordinating the work through the new core energy team, with resources being moved from other departments. And the Premier is taking the lead as the chair of the Energy Council. So that work includes 11 different Western Cape government departments. The budget has then been split up, but it's been defined in a very integrated manner. We had a special energy MTech, and then parts of the budget assigned to different departments, but as one collective energy program rather than as separate votes. So as an example, for the 23-24 financial year, DLG will be supporting the 22-23 financial year. DLG is supporting municipalities in terms of emergency diesel generator procurement. Moving forward, we're going to collectively need to find a more sustainable approach to energy for critical services because the cost of diesel is becoming incredibly prohibitive. So the .P core energy team will be working with DLG, or is working with DLG, to test alternative approaches for energy for critical services. So, for example, we're looking at testing a PV and battery system in terms of technology, systems, financial aspects in select areas, and assess to what extent that can be used as an alternative to diesel. The further example of cross-collaborative working is the municipal IPP procurement work and the project preparation facility that are being established. Will be established in the Department of Infrastructure, but the work will be done in integration with Department of Local Government, Provincial Treasury, and the .P teams. Thanks so much.
Thank you, team, for all those comprehensive replies. Back to you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tofi. Members, we will now have a round for a follow-up round for questions. Are there any further questions? Okay, I recognize Member Nkonzo.
Thank you, Chair. You covered me with one question on the energy resilience project, and I hear that the ones from the SMME, they are still being discussed with the National Department, and I'm not sure whether that then means the delivery will only take place in the next financial year once all of those are clarified in terms of the house and those technical issues. And in that regard, maybe if colleagues can then explain because I see actually that the energy project are in 2 programs. So I just wanted to understand that I think there's an allocation of almost 28 million for this particular financial year drawn out into the other MTEF cycle. So I want to understand what then is the difference with those projects, different to the ones on the SMMEs. Are these projects that have already been, I think they're on page 643 under program 5. So I just want to understand whether those ones, I'm hoping I'm not, yes, whether those ones in 5.8, whether those ones have already been identified or they are also still under preparatory phase. Then the other question, Chair, is that on page 615, I see the department has done some info sessions with the CIDB. I'm assuming, the CIDB under the Contracted Development Program. And my question is, given that, if one looks at the infrastructure book itself, as this government for just, we are spending almost 32.56 actually billion rands on infrastructure. And therefore, with this a program that I think colleagues were talking about, G4J, is whether there is at a cluster level, whether there is any engagements that are specific to direct a contractor development program, given, this huge infrastructure development, infrastructure-led growth that also my colleague had made mention earlier on, because that's the thing about the infrastructure-led growth. It's very good in paper once it's raised, and there's always, very huge amounts, and one is always looking at this, presumed trickle effect thereof. So my question here is that with that partnership on enterprise development, what has been the appetite, or if there is any of such embedded in that 32.6 billion rand of infrastructure projects, wherein we can see, growth of our grade 1 to 4 contractors who are actually doing, work more in subcontracting your bigger projects that are more packaged at the big kind of capital project. Is this that kind of work? And if so, can colleagues just share with us, particularly around enterprise development and related sort of jobs that could actually be accrued by private sector from it?
Thank you very much. I recognize Member Seleku.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, on page 616, can the department just give us just a little bit of info in terms of how they envisage to reach those 600,000 jobs by 2035, and what role is, I don't know whether we still use local economic development plans within municipalities, and what role, if there is such plans at municipalities, and what role are those plans going to play towards contributing or achieving the envisaged goal of by 2035 in making sure that we do actually reach 600,000 jobs that are sustainable? Because we have seen with the NDP has been adopted, but there is less progress made in that regard. And whether the achieve or the objects that we're supposed to achieve in terms of the NDP will be achieved, one would say we doubt it, because there has not been any synergy and there has not been any implementation in making sure that we move along, we reach actually these goals that we want to reach. So yeah, I wouldn't want the G4J to fail, and one would want to know how are we going to make sure that we reach, and then what plans are we having to make sure that there is nothing that is going to stand in our way of making sure that we do actually reach these goals, these jobs, and these jobs are indeed not just permanent and temporary jobs, but they are sustainable jobs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Member Seleku. My question, before I hand back to the department, is with regards to page 638 on trade sector development. I see that there is an 11% increase in funding to Wesgro. And so I'd like to know what role will Wesgro play in the implementation of G4J and also in horizontal enablement? And also, is this related as well to the aims of enhancing FDI or investment into the province? Thank you. I will now hand back to the Minister.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair, to you and the members for those questions. Just finishing my notes here. Perhaps we could ask Helen Davies just to answer the question from Honourable Nkondlo about the different energy projects and how those all fit together, and then also a little bit on those timelines. Many of those projects are for delivery in the current financial year, but of course the budgets are also designed to go over the MTEF, so that within the 3 years, some of those projects that need a little bit more time can or will need continuous work can do so. Then perhaps I don't know, Mr. Tofi, we could ask Joe Johnson to answer the questions on enterprise development and the role of the private sector and on construction. And then we also have a question on LED assessments. And then perhaps we could ask the CEO of Wesgro just to talk a little bit about Wesgro's contribution to G4J as well as attracting FDI. Did I miss anything?
No, I think you've tackled that, and perhaps Josh can speak about the CIDB program that we did, the one that Member Nkondlo raised. But should we start with Helen just to address the energy distribution questions, and then we'll come to you, Joe, next on the big $1 million 600K job question. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for the questions, honourable members. So in terms of the other energy projects for which budget has been assigned, we have the Green Economy Ecosystem Support Project. That's the work that's direct support to industry, including it's focused on energy and water. It includes the development of market intelligence reports, industry briefs, events, direct support to industry, and then also supporting municipalities to unlock barriers that need to be unlocked by industry in order to both take up the options around energy and water, alternative options, but also to support the growth in those sectors. So the companies that provide the goods and services related to green economy focused on energy and water. The drafting of that contract is underway, so that will be hitting the ground running. In terms of green hydrogen development, I think Herman Jonker's on the call if he can give further information. But essentially, there's substantial work that's been undertaken by Saldanha Bay IDZ and with the department and Wesgro. Province or Cabinet has endorsed a green hydrogen position paper. They've signed an MOU with the Northern Cape to build a green hydrogen corridor. Also continual engagements with multiple investors, Infrastructure SA and industry players, so those both in South Africa but also international counterparts. The department facilitates a green hydrogen coordination work group to really define and detail the project concept and identify what needs to be taken forward. And to support some of that, they're working to access in the final stages of accessing Spanish funding to help with some of that work. The procurement for services to undertake a green hydrogen strategy development is already underway, and there have been extensive engagements with between SASL and AMSA around making their partnership around green hydrogen a reality and supporting in whatever way possible. But Herman Jonker might have further to add. Also included in the funding will be used for what's called the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan. So this will be led by Programme 3. And this is essentially the plan that defines for the energy resilience approach that we're taking and the vision and goals that we have, how do we prioritize our investment? What are we going to invest and where? What's the size of that investment? And then what is our approach to attracting finance, whether that be funding or finance? What are the various financial mechanisms we will use, etc., to actually enable implementation of the Western Cape's Energy Resilience Programme? Thanks so much.
Thank you, Helen. Just in order of the way the question was asked, Joshua, would you like to address this CIDB question from Member Nkondlo, please?
So thanks, Rashid. So in terms of the CIDP issue, the contractor development program, so the department partners with the Department of Transport and Public Works around the contractor information sessions. So these are specifically focused at your emerging contractors, especially those level 1 and 2 in terms of CIDB levels, and your aspirant contractors. So the Department also of Transport and Public Works has a range of other interventions, training interventions that looks at contractors at different grades in terms of ensuring that they get capacitated to enable them to access opportunities. So our engagement with the Department of Transport and Public Works focuses on how do we...
I'm not sure if it's just me, but we have lost the speaker.
It's Rashid here. It's Rashid here, but I could hear the speaker, Joshua, quite clearly, Chairperson. Not sure if anyone else can confirm that.
It must be on my end. Thank you. Apologies, Joshua. Please continue.
No worries.
Minister, are you able to hear Joshua? Just to check somebody else?
He's clear, Rashid.
Okay.
So, thank you, Rashid. So as I indicated, the Department of Transport and Public Works has a range of other support interventions to look at capacitating contractors with a higher CIDB grading level. So some of those training extend between 6 months to 18 months, but that's obviously for higher grades in terms of contractors. So our support with the Department of Transport and Public Works focuses on a number of areas. One is looking at compliance criteria and enabling contractors to take up economic opportunities or procurement opportunities. So unless a business becomes compliant, it's going to be difficult for them to access those particular opportunities. We also engage with these contractors around both financial and non-financial support that's available by government departments and agencies, for example, such as CEDA and CIFA. We also try and talk to them about some of the business's challenges and how they can possibly overcome these challenges. And we also give them exposure to a number of both provincial and national procurement opportunities that's available. And not just that, but also looking at specifically what opportunities could they find even in the private sector, because it's about ensuring that these big businesses become compliant and they become capacitated in a way that they're ready to access the opportunities that arise due to the kind of investment in terms of infrastructure that will be made available. So it's about making sure that these businesses is correctly positioned to take up those economic opportunities when they do become available in terms of the infrastructure spend. Thanks, Rashid.
Thank you so much. Joanne, would you like to speak to Member Seleko's question here on the jobs and the role of the municipalities?
Sure, not a problem. So our modeling has basically shown that for every 1% of GDP growth, employment grows by 0.6%. So it's not an absolute one for every 1% employment growth. There's a slight differential, but effectively for every 1% GDP growth, employment will grow by 0.6%. Now that's based on historical trends. So if you look at the modeling going forward, if we reach the 1 trillion rand target, which basically means we have to grow between 4 to 6% exponentially, it means that we will essentially create between 600,000 to 1 million jobs in the next 12 years. And these will obviously be sustainable because it's essentially companies that are private sector that's growing and creating those jobs. What has historically happened is often talk about the trickle down or the lack of the trickle down effect or jobless growth, but what has effectively happened over the last 15 or so years, 20 years, has been, although the economy has been growing, it has not been growing as fast as the amount of interest into the job market. So over the last 10 years, the economy has grown by 0.5%, whereas the market entry or the population growth has been in excess of 2%. So it basically means there are more entrants into the job market relative to the amount or the extent of which our economic growth rate has been able to absorb them. And so that's essentially how we've done the projections and the modeling, and that's been verified by a number of economic experts. And I think certainly supported and endorsed by them. That's the first thing. And then there was a second thing, just to say that in with regards to the infrastructure and the micro, particularly there's explicit mention made of micro builders. So within the Growth for Jobs strategy, it talks about economic infrastructure in the townships. And it's making sure that whatever actually does get created in terms of enabling business infrastructure that we bring, and also housing, that we certainly bring the micro builders on board in the opportunities that presents. Then the third thing was, I think somebody had asked, one of the members had asked about the IDP and whether the G4J basically will land in these municipalities, and they certainly will. So again, there's explicit mention of the spatial dimensions of the Growth for Jobs strategy, and the intention in going forward and the implementation plan is that the province will work very closely with the municipalities, essentially to look at the three pillars that constitute the Growth for Jobs strategies. One, it's really around enablers. So it's how do we make sure that the infrastructure that enables growth is there. That talks to water, energy, connected economy, etc., etc. The second is also to say, how do we stimulate growth opportunities? And that's basically when we look at municipalities, which are the growth opportunities, which are the sectors that are growing, and how we can stimulate and support that. And then the third is essentially around market growth. So you can have investment, but you need to essentially sell your services, your products, and it's making sure that we are able to leverage of particularly the export opportunities and growth, leverage of that working through Wesgro, that enables then municipalities across the province to actually benefit from or certainly actualize the Growth for Jobs strategy. Thanks, Rashid.
Thank you, Joanne. And then lastly, Ilse, perhaps you could just lead into the issue of the additional funds to Wesgro and the G4J alignment there. And if Ronel could add if you wish.
Sure. Thanks, Rashid. Chair, just briefly with regards to the increase in funding. So there was an additional allocation that was made to Wesgro, in particular over the MTEF, in terms of the green hydrogen work. So I think in the first year, Ronel can confirm, but the work there will be mostly focused in terms of developing a green hydrogen strategy. And then the years thereafter, that will be the implementation thereof. Then in terms of the role of the entity, so as Joe just kindly introduced that, so 3 of the priority focus areas is with, well, 2 in particular that has to do with Wesgro's mandate is in terms of exports and investments. So as our IPA and as well as in terms of export also includes tourism, there's a role to play for Wesgro. When they present the G4J strategy, you'll clearly see that in terms of the big interventions that we'll be doing, but mostly it's in terms of attracting, in terms of the FDI. There's particular focuses in terms of industry opportunities with regards to attracting specific investment, as well as particular markets. That's in terms of the investment strategy work that we're also currently busy working on. And then, of course, in particular, it's the direct domestic investment. So there's a big lever, as you heard, that 200 billion investment target is quite large, so that we're going to need all our entities on hands on deck in terms of responding to that. And then, of course, exports, which is a big lever. Specifically in terms of our short-term opportunities, that's where Wesgro will be responding to in terms of the export-ready businesses, where DDAT will be mostly responding to in terms of building that pipeline to realize our export opportunities. And then, of course, tourism is a big contributor, and you've seen that in the job numbers over the last quarter. So that's where we will land where Wesgro will play in terms of promoting the destination under the DMO. Ronel, I don't know if you want to add.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I think maybe just a couple of points. The first point is that Wesgro had a dedicated person working together with the rest of the provincial departments on the G4J strategy process. Wesgro will contribute to all of the key priority focus areas, as Ilse indicated: investment, exports, and that will include tourism, but there's also a big role that we will play in the tech and innovation space. To date, we've already aligned our budget to reflect the priorities for G4J. With a particular focus, we have shifted funds towards attracting energy investments, attracting investments into the green economy, and also to innovation. We have already initiated the process to build capacity within Wesgro and the capability to respond to some of the new elements: green hydrogen, energy, green economy, tech. And really our focus is on ensuring that we're able to make the Wesgro cargo faster, to ensure that we can ramp up over time to meet some of the objectives. Perhaps just to respond also to the question asked by the chairperson, we are also in the enablement space. We're certainly supporting the Minister on visas, AGOA, and we will continue to also look at how we have a focus on skills. I'll leave it there. Thank you, HOD.
Thanks very much, team. Back to you, Chairperson. I hope you're back and hearing us clearly.
Thank you very much. I hope that I am back and that you can hear me clearly. Members, are there any further questions? I recognize Member van der Westhuizen.
Thank you, Chair. And my apologies if this has already been dealt with, but I see on page 636 quite a significant increase in what is called other transfers to private enterprises. If I could just perhaps get an indication of which enterprises are those. Then I also see that there seems to be a complete drop in support for the Western Cape Liquor Authority. And then on the bottom of page 637, it says the program structure has been amended as the entire SAC program 3.3 strategic initiative unit will now be housed within program 5. Now, I presume that was then to explain some of the changes in table 9.3, but we're actually seeing that the bottom line there in table 9.3 is increasing. So I'm struggling to put the note to the text of, or the figures of table 9.3. If I could ask that just be clarified. And then also table 931, program 3, trade and sector development, there is a drop in the compensation of employees. Perhaps that note at the bottom of the previous page is actually referring then to this table, but if somebody could just help me to find my way between those changes from year to year, and particularly the very sharp increase in transfers to private enterprises. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I recognize Member Nkondlo, whose hand went up. Member Nkondlo, I just want to check, did you have a question?
Oh, sorry, Chair, I had muted. I was still muted, sorry. Yes, I do. I was saying, following from Member Andrikas, I just wanted to say, I just wanted to follow on the spike in some of the expenditures. One was picking up, particularly in your economic classifications. I mean, there seems to be some, especially in some programs, a spike like, you know, the catering, which is actually going up with about 240%. I just want to understand what is it that is actually making this increase. And actually, one you could pick it up, I think, in one of the programs. I think program 2. Actually, the increase is there, you know, including this notion of venues, transport, you know, fleet services. Maybe colleagues, if you can just give an explanation of these particular sharp increases. And also, Chair, just to understand from my side that there is I'm trying to open the page where it explains the personnel. This page now. Okay. It's in page 651. If one looks at the personnel numbers from this financial year going up, there seem to be a smaller a decrease in number of personnel from, I think, starting from trade and sector development right up to, I think, skills development. Maybe such can just be explained going forward. And I think one just gets very worried about particularly the skills development because its budget keeps on reducing, especially on partnerships, the same way that the philosophy is saying will deliver through partnerships, but the funds that actually goes into the function that is supposed to deal with partnerships is actually being reduced. I'm not sure whether you've got a different strategy which does not need that much resourcing, you know, particularly around this particular function because it's the least funded if one looks at all the different programs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I see no further hands, and so I will put a question forward myself. Just picking up from CEO Stander, who mentioned that part of the budget would be used for AGOA and the skills visas. If I could please get a bit more clarity on what the budget will do particularly and which part of the budget that was or came from. And then just relatedly on investment, I wanted to get an understanding of which countries in particular, or which markets will be targeted as a part of the investment strategy. Thank you. I will now hand over to the Minister and to the Acting HOD.
Thank you, Chair. Acting HOD, I wonder if we could perhaps ask the CFO to assist with some of the shifts between programs. And then I'll hand over to you for the personnel decreases in particular programs. And then perhaps we could ask Nizam to speak about partnership funding.
Perfect. And perhaps CFO, if you could speak to some of the issues of the catering changes and the venues and so forth as well. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Maybe to start off with a lot of questions, but maybe to start off with page 636. I think with regard to page 636, the significant increase that's coming through in terms of the transfer payments relates to the energy, the SMME energy fund that we've been talking about in terms of the additional allocations, the 18.5 million, that's what's coming through in terms of that area. At this stage, we do not have the beneficiaries. So I think the earlier question was also around the progress in terms of trying to get the national partnerships on board. So once the program actually rolls out and we do our application process and our adjudication process, we will report through our annual report process who the beneficiaries of that fund would be. So that relates to that significant increase. With regard to the question around on table 9.3, the note itself is a legacy note. So it has nothing to do with, I think it's been in the budget book for the last 10 years. The budget structures are set by National Treasury, and when a department deviates from a budget structure, they need to then just indicate via a note that they've actually deviated. So the note itself, which refers to strategic initiatives, it's a sub-program that we had, and Joe must help me here because it was a sub-program, I think about 10 years ago, and that sub-program doesn't exist. So the relationship between the note and the decrease in the next area has actually got nothing to do with each other. The COE reduction in terms of trade and sector development relates to staff that have actually resigned within the sub-program trade and sector development. Then just in terms of the general comment around, I think Member Nkondla asked about the changes in terms of the economic classifications and items. If member can just maybe refer to the first program, I think it's program 1, you'll see quite a significant reduction within that area. And the approach for this year, and aligned to what we're trying to do in terms of having a larger footprint and ensuring that service delivery occurs across the province, we've actually decentralized the budgets into the programs. So initially, program 1 would carry the S&T, the GG vehicles, and a lot of the travel costing. What we've now done is we've decentralized it so that the program managers can actually have far better control over the budgets, but also just to allow for better costing of programs. So that's why you're seeing such a lot of changes coming through within that area. Rashid, I'm not sure if I covered everything.
CFO, I wonder if you could just cover the issue. I can talk to it as well, but the liquor authority transfer.
Oh, yes.
Would you like to address that?
Yeah. So just in terms of the ease of doing business area, what we did, there's 2 programs that we had last year the year before as well, in terms of the ease of doing business program, one being focused on improvements across municipalities, and the second one, business enhancements or improvements across the provincial departments. One of those that we supported was the Liquor Authority, where we've automated their system. So the once-off allocation that you're seeing there is just us providing financial support for the Liquor Authority to actually implement an automated system. So it's not something that we continue with. It's just once-off, just to capitalize and provide that financial support to the Liquor Authority. Thank you.
CFO, let me attempt an answer on the HR shifts, but you can add to this as well in terms of detail. But the shifts you'll see from the previous years or between programs is how we've actually started to realign our personnel and our structures around G4J. But CFO, would you like to add anything specific on that? I think we're talking table 10.1. We're talking about the shifts of personnel.
Yeah, and then also the numbers that you're seeing coming through in the prior year includes grad interns and other interns. With the budget reductions in terms of COE, those are the areas that we've not been able to fund in 23-24. So within program 3 specifically, we had 5 grad interns within the 22-23 year, and now you're seeing that being reduced within the 23-24 financial year.
Thanks, CFO. And then I'll go straight to you, Ronelle, at Wesgro. Maybe you could just talk about some of what you're doing with those additional budgets, but particularly also your investment markets that you've selected for next year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we've obviously there were two questions. The first question related to some of the examples that I gave. So within Wesgro, we have something called the Advocacy and Advisory Team. And the team there would look at any issues related to trade, investment, or tourism. So, for example, one of the issues would be AGOA, but we would also look at the EU, EPA, the US, not US, the UK EPA. We look at issues like the green transition. So all of that would come out of our advisory and advocacy team. With respect to investment, with investment, we don't choose sectors, but we do find that there is some sort of sector focus. So our focus at the moment is certainly to attract investment into the green economy, which includes energy. The green economy, as the members may be aware, includes renewable energy, e-mobility, the circular economy, and we've actually attracted quite a lot of investment into that area, certainly in the last financial year. In addition, we look at film, the creative industries, health, agri-processing, manufacturing, real estate, and of course tech. So those are the sectors that we're currently looking at. Over the past 5 years or so, we have seen that the majority of investment has come from Europe, the UK and the US, and it's really been very much in the tech and green economy space. We are also at the moment looking to the east to further grow our investment footprint. I will leave it there. Thank you, HOD.
Thank you. Thanks, Ronel. And Nizam, I was going to not leave you out. I'm coming back to you. Do you want to address that issue of some of our partnerships?
And thanks for that, Rashid. Thanks, Minister. So I think, Member Nkondlo, your anxiety about the decline in funding for partnerships is very well placed. And without the partnerships, our ability to deliver would reduce by more than 70%, 75% actually, right? But we have compensated for that because what we require to develop these partnerships is not funding, right? What we require in the development of partnerships is warm bodies to develop the partnerships, right? We've got a very good team that's been fostering partnerships and relationships with key stakeholders at national, provincial, and private sector. And the strength of that particular team has meant that it reduced the emphasis on having hard cash in the partnership space, right? I think that's the first. Next is, even though the reduction in funding for partnerships has seen some decline, but I just want to go through some of the wins that team has shown for over the last year only. So from national government, we received 104 million. So that's either National Treasury, GTAC, or other national sources, and that represents 20% more than the allocation that we have for voted funds for projects, right? And that is really the strength of the partnerships, and perhaps testament to the fact that you don't need money to develop the partnerships. What you do need is very capable individuals to foster and develop those partnerships. And obviously you have to do that through a history of delivery. When you go to partners and you're a new entity and there's no history of delivery, no one really wants to partner with you, right? So I think that's the first. From private sector, our partnerships delivered around about just over 200 million rand from private sector in support of our skills development. So if you think that we've got about 80-odd million rand project for funding for projects, or in this case, I think it's about 90-odd million rand, we will intend to leverage more than 300 million rand from those partnerships. Just to give you a sense of what we do with those partnerships, so one of our key partners is the Bavarian government. In fact, one of our staff has been invited to Bavaria to share some of our experiences, not only in partnerships, but also in the dual vocation. And they're paying for the trip and everything else, so there's no cost to the department. But again, our experience on how we collaborate and partner in developing these programs that requires very complex partnerships. It's the partnership arrangement that brought about the number of new green academic instruments, and the cost to the department was very, very minimal in delivering these new academic instruments. With respect to the universities, we've got a number. We've got a number of new curriculum academic instruments developed there, again, also within partnerships, right? And that has led us, if you think that we have about just under 50,000 matriculants leaving the system, we about just over 4,000 or so beneficiaries a year we transition straight from the schooling system into employment. So that's nearly 10% of matriculants that we transition into employment that typically wouldn't find employment. It's not to say that we don't require money, obviously. When we do partner, every 1 rand, we will leverage 3 rand. So if there's 0 rand, we leverage 0 rand, right? And that allows us to transition young kids, and most of our kids, about 70% of the young adults are female, and they'll come from areas, the bulk of them will come from areas like Khayelitsha, Nyanga, Mitchell's Plain, Delft. Those are the areas, and about 80–90% of them will come from those particular areas. So just in summary, the partnership funding on the partnership side, we don't need some funding there. That's where your concern is. We do need some elsewhere, but with every rand, we multiply that so that we can deliver on our mandate. Thank you, Rashid.
Thank you, Nizam. Chairperson, just back to you. And if we're going to continue much further, I was wondering if we could have a body break at some point for a few minutes. Thanks. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Toby. Perhaps let's just check and see if there are any further questions from the members first. All right, I see no further questions. And I also just want to afford the opportunity to any members of the public who might be here or might be online.
Chair, before you go online, I wanted to check, is this SEZ here?
No, I don't
Chair,
believe they
can
are.
you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Perhaps I can just check with acting HOD. Is SEZ represented here?
Yeah, but both the SEZs are here. If there was a specific question you needed asked. We've got they are here. Matt Cullinan arrived, I think, a little bit late. He's the CEO, and Doug is here representing the report Saldanha.
Okay, thank you. Member Nkontlo, was there a question that you wanted to ask to the SEZ?
Yes, Chair. I just wanted in page 643. Anyway, Atlantis is one of my special entities. So to continue in a discussion about if hearing from them not go well with me. So I reached for the sake of just hearing their voice. I know they've been doing great work in actually giving some energy to that entity. But in page 643, Chair, I see in terms of their budget, they are mentioning there that some money that will be given there allocated for special economic zones. I just wanted to check how much is actually earmarked for Atlantis, and at what stage of their development are they at this point, if one can just get a broad sense from that.
Okay, thank you very much. Member Nkontlo, can I check in with you and see if you have any further questions? If not, my suggestion would be that this be our last round.
Not at all, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands, and so my suggestion, acting HOD, is that we just answer this last question, and then I can excuse the department.
That's perfect, and thank you. And Minister, should we dive straight into that? Perhaps CFO can just
yes, please.
Just emphasize the particular allocations per entity, and then let's hear from Matthew, if you want to come in there and just speak a little bit about the stage you're at on Atlantis. But CFO, can I ask you to just clarify first from page let's just see page 643, the actual allocations, if that's not clear.
Yeah. So maybe just in terms of the Atlantis SEZ allocation, it's 4906 or 40,906,000, which is on page 663, I think, of the book. And then, as we said earlier, was so we only have two, Saldanha IDZ and Atlantis Special Economic Zone. With the Saldanha IDZ, it's a 12.7 million, although not for the operational support, but for the once-off allocation in terms of an infrastructure project.
Cool. Then Matthew, perhaps you could just briefly talk about where you're at in the stage, and then, yeah, Chairperson, if you want to, we could ask Doug. I know we wanted to break and close, but maybe Doug could say very briefly what stage they're at, you know. But Matthew, over to you.
Thank you very much, Acting HOD, and thank you, honourable members. Honourable Member Nkondlo, yeah, we are at an exciting stage now. We have been through a process of appointing a principal contractor to start construction on the first zone within the SEZ. That zone will start with the construction program in May. As part of that, we've also put together a series of work packages specifically targeting the SMMEs in and around Atlantis. And the principal contractor has also come to the party in terms of providing support to those SMMEs. So we're hoping that we can achieve up to 47% of the contract value going to SMMEs, but at the very least 30% in terms of national norms. So that program is going very well, and we've been working very closely with the community structures. We've set up an infrastructure working group who have been advising us on the processes as well. So that's an exciting area to watch. I think we've also been doing great work on the community skills and enterprise development front. We've had engagements with various funders, KFW, NBI. For example, we have a partnership with NBI at the moment, which is funding interns coming out of the West Coast College on maintenance. And we've placed those in various schools and factories in and around Atlantis. And that side of what the SEZ does, that sort of inclusion side and linking to the opportunities coming out of the green economy is, I think, one of the key areas of focus going forward. There's huge opportunity, obviously, in landing an investor and creating direct jobs, but there's also a big opportunity in terms of the backward and forward linkages and so forth that can be created around that. There's a lot more that can be done and that needs to be done, and I just want to say thank you to the department for our budget allocation, which was restored. I know they were under huge pressure from cuts, but I think the recognition is there that the programs are solid and what we're doing is solid. The other point I want to make is we've also already bought our first factory, and that was again thanks to the approval of the minister, the MEC. We got some money back from the VAT, and that we were for the purchase of the land, and we were able to allocate that to buy a factory in the zone, and that factory has now been tenanted, and we had the launch of that about 2 weeks ago during the shareholders meeting in Atlantis. And we've also signed both the lease with the tenant for that factory as well as for the first factory that will be built in Zone 1 once that's developed. So there are some exciting movements, and we hope we can continue with this momentum. Thank you.
Just going back to you, Matt, I believe congrats are in order on two fronts. I believe yesterday you were finally appointed as HOD, I mean as CEO, but also that it's your birthday today. So congrats.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you. St. Patrick's Day. Yeah.
Thanks for being here on St. Patrick's Day and your birthday. So Chairperson, I'll hand back to you if you, thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. And my apologies, Matt, I didn't know it was your birthday. Happy birthday and happy St. Paddy's. I hope you have a fantastic day. What a day to be born. With that, I would like to sincerely say thank you to the department. We recognize the amazing work that you're doing in helping to grow the economy. We're very grateful to you and thank you for indulging our questions and helping us to do our job in terms of oversight. You make it easier with the excellent work that you're doing. So with that, I would like to excuse you so that we can move on to our own business. Thank you so much.
Sorry, Chair. I just wanted to check on the members of the public before the department goes.
I did ask earlier if there were members of the public, but I didn't see any hands.
Okay, Chair.
All right. Thanks to the department. May be excused.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thanks for the team for being here on a Friday afternoon.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a good one. Bye. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Chair.
Happy birthday, Matt.
Bye.
Okay, thank you, members. I do see there are a few officials, but I imagine that they are leaving at this point. Can I get an indication of hands for any resolutions? I recognize Member van der Westhuizen.
Thank you, Chairperson. Having been able to deliberate and listen to the officials on the budget vote and what they intend to achieve, I would like to propose that we support this budget vote. Vote number 12.
Okay, thank you. Any other resolutions? I note
on resolutions, Chair.
Yes,
on resolutions. Can we ask that the department provides us update on the green economy projects that are focused on the SMMEs once their deliberations with the national partners and the likes, CIFA is concluded, so that we can get an understanding of what those projects are, how are those projects going to be implemented and identified. Secondly, Chair, in the same vein, I think maybe at some point we may want to ask the department, once it's concluded this strategy they're speaking about, and the broad G4J, so that at least one has got a sense when people are making reference, to this G4J, what in the context of economic development, what does it mean? And also, when are they concluding this one that they said, we'll speak to informal economy and the township economy. So one is interested in just understanding that. Then lastly, Chair, perhaps during our program this year, if it would allow, I would suggest that maybe we go and do oversight in the Atlantis, now that they've actually even managed to even secure, another building where there's actual tenants. So perhaps it's something that we can actually start looking at. So those are my recommendations on resolutions.
Thank you. You took the words out of my mouth. I also wanted to suggest a standing committee on G4J after launch and as they begin their implementation. So that's fantastic. Member van der Westhuizen, I see your hand. Is that a legacy hand in terms of resolutions?
Indeed.
If there are no further resolutions, then we'll move on. So we will now consider the adoption of the draft report on vote 12. If we can have...
Before that, Chair.
Yes?
Can I make my, as the ANC, we would not support the vote as per Rule 90, we register our minority view.
Okay, noted.
Chair.
So, I recognize, apologies, was that Member Seleko?
Yes, Chair. I would like to second the proposal from Member van der Westhuizen in terms of supporting the vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You've all jumped ahead of me, but I can see we're eager to wrap up. Thank you. Member Brinkes.
Apologies.
Yes,
Chair.
thank you very much and good afternoon to everybody, Chair. Yes, in terms of the Al Jamaa also, we also want to express our no support for this budget, and we second the ANC in not supporting this budget. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, duly noted. Thank you. We'll just give Lizette a minute to amend the report, and then I will read it in, and then we can vote on adoption. Lizette, if you can just indicate to me when I can read in the report.
You may go ahead, Chairperson.
Okay, thank you. If you could just make it a little bit bigger for me, please. Doesn't seem to be updating on my side. I'm not sure if you, okay, there we go. I think if you could just delete the part that says if there is a minority view. Oh goodness. There's something happening to your screen on my side. Okay. You can see it's a bit bigger now. May I read it in?
Yes, you may, Chairperson. Sorry, that's my mouse giving problems today.
Okay, no problem. And I think we might just want to check the spelling on Al Jamaa. I don't know if the M has to be capitalized.
Thank you, Chair. If I may come in, Chair, the spelling of the word Al Jamaa, it's
Sorry, remember?
yeah, the spelling needs a bit of a alignment there. It will be in the beginning ALJAMA, and then there must be a space, and at the end AH. I don't know if you got that.
Yes,
Thank you.
okay, thank you so much. All right, I think we're ready to read it in.
Can you see, Chairperson?
Yes, sorry. Okay, I'm ready. Committee report to the Standing Committee on Finance, Economic Opportunities and Tourism on vote 12, Department of Economic Development and Tourism, in schedule to the Western Cape Appropriation Bill B2 of 2023, dated 17 March 2023. The Standing Committee on Finance, Economic Opportunities and Tourism reports that it has concluded its deliberations on vote 12, Department of Economic Development and Tourism, in the schedule of the Western Cape Appropriation Bill B2 of 2023, referred to the committee in terms of Standing Rule 188. and that it supports the vote referred to it. Noting a minority view in accordance with Standing Rule 90, the African National Congress and Al Jama'ah express a minority view not to support the vote. Thank you. Can we please get an indication of the support of the report? Member van der Westhuizen?
I support the report.
Thank you.
Seconded, Chair.
Support the report.
Thank you very much all. All right, so we have wrapped up with the voting of this. And members, I just want to conclude this portion of the meeting. In terms of our next item, I am going to adjourn and wish you all a lovely weekend. I hope you managed to get some rest and to enjoy yourselves and your time with your families. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, everybody.
Osilala.